Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Releasing Trauma. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Katherine James. We're going to be talking about the journey of hope and healing from trauma. So I'm looking forward to this. Katherine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about this chat.
I am too. Before we, really get into it, let's talk a little bit about you and have you tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah. Depression and anxiety have been a constant thread running through my life, starting from the age of 8 or 9. But after decades of struggling, I wrote a book called The Story of Hope to help me to come to terms with that 7 years ago. And I wrote it then and published it recently. I'll touch on 3 small episodes when depression came to a head, and it became a real problem and impacted my life really in a huge way. The first one was the little girl in the attic. I spent a lot of hours as a child in the large attic of the house by the sea in a wild corner of Northumberland in the UK, where I grew up, trying to make sense of the world. I was shy, I was sensitive, took every unkind comment to heart, and the world was a really scary place for me. So I read fantasy tales like the Chronicles of Narnia, Wizard of Oz, and Hobbit, and that helped me get a bit of a handle on life. I was absolutely amazed by the heroes like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz and how she overcame incredible hardships to find herself beyond the rainbow. And I thought, well, if she can, then so can I. So then I felt really sad inside all the time. I thought I nurtured the belief that I could change a sad story for a better one. And that kind of kept me going. But fast forwarding to my 30s, I landed a dream job as a marketing manager in a large telecoms company. But it involved 4.5 hours commuting a day to work. And I didn't mind it, I liked it, but I was getting really burnt out. But 3 months after I started, that dream job turned into a nightmare. So it was a Monday night. I came home from work. My husband picked me up and took me home, looking ashen-faced, and he sat me in a chair and he delivered some news, some devastating news to me. Someone very close to me had committed suicide, and he was my soulmate. Straight away, I felt guilty and very ashamed and felt it was my fault, this is how depression can give us very distorted thinking.
Yeah.
I wasn't to blame, but that I did think that, and those thoughts triggered a meltdown. So what's a meltdown feel like? Well, everything changed in my life, all the color and the sound and just the lights sort of disappeared out of my life. I just went through the motions of going to work, and I just felt like detached and disorientated from everything. I didn't feel like a real human being anymore. And when I went to work, everybody avoided me. It was more of a taboo subject then than now. And I couldn't talk to anyone. And they sent me to a counsellor, but he nodded off on me. So I was so sort of in such pain, and I just felt, I never want to go back to that. My solution was to bury my depression and just not think about it and become a workaholic, disguise it, wear a mask, go out doing retail therapy to make myself temporarily better, perfectionist, poor self-care. I didn't really care what happened to me, Tracy. I really had a death wish on myself. And I lived my life like that for 14 years. So 7 years ago, you can't keep something like that pressed down for too long because it's going to come up and bite you in the jugular. And it did. And I was standing in front of a big window looking out at the sunshine in a job I didn't love as a marketing contractor. And I remembered a program that I'd been helping some young people with mental health issues to become leaders and get out of their depression that way. And they had described depression as a thick blanket that suffocated them, and they felt forgotten by the world. And I felt exactly like that. I felt completely hopeless. So I looked for a book to help me become the hero of my life, but I couldn't find it. So that was the book that I had to write myself. And I crept out onto a bench outside in the lunch break, and the words just flowed out my pen. And it's called The Story of Hope. It's the story of a girl trapped in the attic of despair who embarks on a hero's journey of self-discovery from the safety of a beautiful cloak. Though it's fictional, it's got a very deep message. So after writing the book, more trauma followed. I fell out of the loft and broke my back.
Oh my goodness.
It was just awful. All the anxiety kind of came home to roost. I took a year out and I was in such pain, and I realized I couldn't live my life like this any longer, that I wanted to change it. I fed up being miserable. So I decided that I couldn't go back to this marketing contractor employment situation, that would set up a storytelling consultancy instead, which I did. And then I took control of my life back and wrote a new chapter of a happier story, and things have got better since then. So really, we can rewrite our stories, and they don't have to be sad ones, they could be happy ones.
Wow, Katherine, that is an amazing, sad journey. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love that you couldn't find the book that you needed, so instead you wrote the book. And how much did that really help you heal?
It did. I must admit, Tracy, I wasn't writing it for myself in some ways. Didn't want anyone to go through what I'd gone through. I wanted to spare them the pain, because it was so horrible how I'd lived my life for so long. But it was so cathartic, because I kind of was that hero in the book. And publishing the book I found really difficult, because being such a perfectionist, I had to make sure that the art was exactly right, because it's a pictorial representation. So that was really difficult. So it took 6 or 7 years for me to actually publish it, because I was too scared to get it out there. I mean, it's a lot of myself in that. But yeah, it definitely has put me on a different path. I know that I've got control now. I know I can go in different directions. I've got an exciting story ahead of me. I love being on this podcast with someone in America. And I just love the fact I can use the book as a platform to talk about mental health and suicide as well, because that person in the attic, that is somebody who's really suffering, has gone through the mill. So yeah, it has really helped me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with suicide, yes, it's a taboo subject still, not as nearly as taboo as it used to be, but it's still one of those things people skirt around because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to talk about it. They're afraid mentioning the word suicide is going to trigger somebody to act. And really, we need to have these conversations, because it's in my experience, the act of suicide is because somebody is just there at the end of their rope. They are hurting so much. They have they can't find a way out of the darkness, out of the pain. And the only way that they can think to stop it is to end it. Yeah,
I think it's not that they don't want to live anymore. They just don't know where to go. They're cornered. Yeah. And nobody can come into their world and help them. And the different surveys have been done in the UK. The Red Cross did one last year, I think, and I think about 40% of people felt that nobody would know if anything had happened to them. The people surveyed wouldn't. They felt that percentage felt that didn't think that anybody would know if something happened to them.
Right.
So this is really scary that they kind of, they're off the radar of people, that they're just unnoticed, they're invisible. It's really scary.
It is, and it's tragic. It really is tragic, because there is hope for these people.
I think as well, it's a big subject, because also you've got to be concerned about the family or the people the suicide affects, who those people may not want it talked about publicly. So there's a big taboo around social networks and different things like that. So it's really difficult to be able to talk honestly about it. And you don't want people to judge you. You really don't. There's nothing to be judged on. As a victim of as a suicide survivor, someone who's taken their life, but you feel that way. You feel a lot of shame and guilt. It's just really hard. It's really hard.
Well, sure. You have the guilt of being the survivor. Why didn't I see the signs? What could I have done to help? Why didn't I help? Why didn't they reach out to me? All of those thoughts, it does it leads to a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, because we feel that we should have been there and we should have done something.
Yeah, I mean, rumination is a really destructive thing, looking back at the past and thinking,
yes,
I could have really done something. And it wasn't until recently that I actually was talking to a therapist, because my mum passed away last year, as well as my best friend, and lots of other things as well. So it goes on, the traumas go on, multiple traumas. We have to be ready for them and look after us, mental health. But this person spent quite a long time talking about, it's very bad to ruminate and get locked and trapped in the past. And then work out through cognitive behavior therapy. I actually do love as a therapy. It helped me untangle my behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, and realize that a lot of those thoughts were quite distorted ones. I shouldn't have been feeling guilty. I even felt that about my mum, because I went up to see her after not seeing her for 7 months, and she literally died in my arms. I had no time to say really much time to say goodbye. And I thought I should have done something to help her. So this is the natural reaction, but with suicide, it's kind of magnified so much. It really is.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the depression and the anxiety and the feeling of despair. Not necessarily just around the suicide, but in general, those feelings are debilitating.
Yeah, they held me back so much in my life, Tracy. It led to extreme perfectionism. So anytime I undertook a task, I had to sit up all night doing it, so it was perfect. And then it would be over, and then I'd be on to the next one. So it's kind of horrible roller coaster of just trying to be just okay, because I didn't feel I felt I had to try harder than other people. And those are the thoughts that constantly came into the anxiety caused that. And the spiral of just not knowing when the next, cycle of depression was going to happen. And if something bad happened, like at work, because I was such a workaholic, that was so huge in my life, work. It wasn't balanced. So I felt my life would end if something went wrong at work. And it's no point I'd sit on the train thinking, I don't want to be here. And it's just really silly to be thinking that way. But that's how depression makes you feel. It just really does bring you into a very negative spiral, which is difficult to get out of.
Oh, absolutely. I know when my depression cycles and comes back around, it's all I can do just to get out of bed in the morning sometimes. It really is, very, very hard to function when that cycle hits. Luckily I'm used to it now, so I can recognize it and take steps, make changes and whatnot to come out of it faster. But, like you, when trauma hits, one of my go-tos is work. I'm a workaholic too, and I have to really I have to tear myself away from the computer every day because I will sit here for hours and just do stuff, and not take care of myself, not spend time with the family, not spend time with the animals, or anything like that. And we really have to put that self-care first, as much as we don't like to, and it's very hard, especially as women.
Yeah, I think so. And if as I learned last year with my mum, and my best friend of 40 years, just died within 2 days of being diagnosed. I just think you just don't know what life's going to throw at you. So if you are neglecting your mental health as well as your physical health, you are going to find it hard to get back up again if something does happen. Something comes from left field. So it's a kind of insurance policy to just keep have a good life, is to look after ourselves just as we would our body, sort of eating the right food and all that sort of thing. But it's not really talked enough about at all. It really isn't. All the way through the pandemic, it was more the physical side that was talked about here, not the mental side. And it's just important being closed up behind four walls and not actually being able to go out, and all social networks sort of disappeared. People are having to work on their own, and not seeing people. That's just as important.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That social contact is so crucial for us. We're very social creatures to begin with. And then when the pandemic hit, and you take that away from us, it's like we all became prisoners of our home. But you're right. Mental health and mental trauma are not talked about. It's getting better, but we still have such a long way to go. There is still such a huge stigma around mental health, mental illness, and all of that. And
I think as well sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of it is just because people still don't really understand. If you haven't gone through it, you can't really understand what it feels like.
No, there's some people just not wired that way. They don't really have mental health issues. They're happy, or they just don't think the same as other people. But at some point they will be affected by it. But if they're not affected right now, it's not relevant to them. That's the problem. So it's easier not to talk about it if someone just doesn't have a clue what you're saying. And that's often why. And with death, I think probably got a couple of weeks in the office to leeway. People say, ring me any time of the day or night, and that type of thing. But after then, that's kind of swept under the carpet. So death, it has a big impact on our mental health. All of these things do. Losses. I've had lots of losses, as you have, and it's just should be a normal part of everyday conversation. I mean, having to live 14 years, not being able to talk to anyone, it is just not good, isn't?
Yeah, no, it's not good. It's hard because we tend to, when we can't talk about it, we internalize it and keep it inside, and it becomes toxic to us.
Yeah,
we have to get it out. So what are some of the things that you found had really helped you to overcome, the past traumas, the grief, the guilt, the shame, the depression?
Well, I think knowing that we don't have to suffer alone, and that we can get expert help. So I've had quite a bit over the years from about 2010 onwards. I went into the Priory for 3 or 4 months, and I literally just got a lot of things dealt with through self-awareness and cognitive behavior therapy and all sorts of stuff like that. That did change my life a lot, but it wasn't until I wrote the book that I actually realized that I actually could change the story. But so I find cognitive behavior therapy good. It's structured, and I can work through my feelings, and I can keep the notes if I go back to it. I find journaling really good, and I kind of write down I've got a strange technique someone taught, my therapist taught me, which was a worry diary. So I kind of write down my worries in the morning, and then I don't think about my worries until the evening, and then I go back over the worries and think, what is hypothetical, what doesn't matter, and what actually can I do something about. Oddly enough, I don't worry through the day. I've got this technique where I can, sort of contain my worry to certain times of the day. So I find that really helpful. Definitely exercise, because I feel differently when I'm outside in the countryside walking about, and distracting myself with nice hobbies that I enjoy. I love reading, and theatre and all sorts of things like that. So just rekindling the joy by doing that, because I think when trapped in depression, you just end up in a sort of daily grind. You need to break that cycle, and also I get very overwhelmed with big tasks, like something somebody else might think, oh, that's easy, just get on with it, clear that box or whatever. I'll just sort of do a little bit at a time. I'll do 10 minutes, be 10 minutes later, but I just don't set myself huge big tasks anymore. I maybe have a couple of tasks I want to do during the day, and other ones, and then it's manageable, because I was just trying to do so much and be such a perfectionist. It just wasn't getting anywhere. And so I find those things really work. Meeting people is important. When I got the suicide news, a friend from work met me every Tuesday for a coffee, and she asked how I was and then listened. And I did pour my heart out to her, but other times we just went shopping. So just being a friend to somebody, if they're going through a horrible time, or reaching out and meeting somebody. Because I think if you're alone and isolated, that's the ideal culture for nurturing depression.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it's just don't feel, to get engaged back in life again is really important. Those are things I do, but I do like cognitive behavior therapy. I'm not so much into mindfulness, but I know some people are helped by that. But I think we have to find our own way. But I would try and reach out for expert help, because it's quite hard to deal with it on your own. I think really do need that. I've had a counsellor and a coach last year when I was going through my bad times, and the coach was qualified in mental health as well, and she helped me go forwards again. So those sort of things can enable me to keep going.
Absolutely agreed. Those are all great tools. Well, Katherine, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about your story and talking with me today about some very sensitive subjects. I really appreciate it.
Is it just okay if I talk to you about the book at all?
Yes, I was just about to ask you about the book and
okay.
and how our listeners can find you online.
Okay, well, it's the book that kind of got me out of this pointless, empty existence to a life of colour and confidence I was desperate to lead, because it was a very grey kind of half life I was living. So it's a beautifully illustrated fictional story about a hero called Hope, who's trapped in the attic of despair, but she feels forgotten by the world. So she's physically trapped in this attic. So she embarks on a journey of self-discovery, protected by a cloak. It starts off as a dark cloak, but then it becomes a beautiful cloak. And then she shares what she's learned at each stage of the journey. Each chapter addresses an emotion. And I got a Polish artist to illustrate it. She understood about fairy tales and folklore and that sort of thing. And she also knew about depression. So it's quite a short book, but it shows how to go on this journey. And it's got a classic kind of hero's journey about responding to the call, overcoming obstacles with the help of supporters and a wise guide, coming out of the journey wiser, and making sort of mental health a positive part of a continuously evolving story. So she finds herself at the end, and she explains how she's got through that journey to help readers to kind of do that for themselves. So it's available on print on demand, and I've got a website called thestoryofhope.co.uk where there's information about the book, and there's also I've got my business is called Copy That Sells, so my business website is copythatsells.co.uk. So to reach me, it's Katherine at copythatsells.co.uk. So yeah, I'm just excited about where this part of the journey is going to lead, because I'd like to use that book to help people who are really stuck to rewrite their story, because I'm quite a skilled storyteller. I've been doing storytelling for about 25 years. So I really know a lot about the topic, and I just hate for someone to have to go through what I did and, sort of not have the life that they deserve to lead.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming on and talking with me and sharing this with us. Listeners, as always, I will have all of Katherine's contact information in her show notes. If you're listening from one of our partner stations, head over to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up Katherine's show, and all of her contact information, the link to her book, everything will be there. Again, Katherine, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. And listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next show.